Well, hello, everyone. Today we are in Dunwoody, Georgia, and we have the pleasure of spending some time with Tim Christian. I first met Tim about 20 years ago at the Alpha Soda in Alpharetta, but I've never had the chance to learn of his background. I've heard little bits and pieces, but never really the full story. I do know that Tim played a significant management role at Williams Brothers Ready Mix, working very closely with Horace and John Williams. So I'm excited to have the opportunity to speak with Tim, to get his story, and to learn the history of this remarkable and highly influential company. So Tim, let's jump in, and if you would, before we get into too much of the detail, I'd love to hear about you personally, and the usual questions, where you were born, and just your early life would be interesting.
Thank you, Bill. I know a lot of people appreciate you doing this. I was actually born in Macon, Georgia, during I was a war baby, and my father was from Covington, Georgia, which we moved back to before I was one, so I don't remember nothing about Macon basically, except it was there. And in those days, Covington was a fantastic place to grow up. I mean, it was just a lot of really nice people. It was a sports-oriented town, like a lot of towns during those days. And I chose to participate in those. Got lucky, I guess. Just got to play Little League Baseball 6 years because my best buddy's daddy was the first coach in the Little League there. And they let him bring his son and a friend in. So you normally don't play for 4 years, but I got to play 6 and learned a lot from that and continued on through high school and college, actually. I signed with Auburn University in 1965 and played football and basketball there for my career as far as playing, and then went to Philadelphia Eagles for a year and found out I was too slow to play there. And on the way back, Coach Jordan called and wanted to know if I wanted to go into coaching. And he said, come on to Auburn on Monday and bring a bag and get ready to go to work. And that's how I got hired there. And recruited South Florida mostly the first 2 or 3 years. But he ended up staying there 12 years. And one year toward the end, I was over at Lakeside High School one day, and there was a guy there named Jerry McDaniel who they had won the state championship, and he encouraged me to go have lunch with John Williams. And believe it or not, this is going to shock you too, Bill. I think I'd already interviewed with Vulcan. I was about to go to work with him. We went to the office there on Glenwood Avenue and went over to East Lake to have lunch and stayed there 3 hours talking. And he said, "What you and your wife doing for dinner on Friday?" I said, "Nothing that I'm aware of right now." He said, "Come to my house for dinner and we'll invite Jerry and Laurie and have a nice dinner." Well, that was his interview. And he wanted to see if my wife was an idiot or whatever. But he offered me a job that night, and I took it.
Wow.
The reason I took it was a good company. I'd been on their yard many times with my father picking up materials. And he was in the development and house building and commercial building in Covington. He told me that all four of the senior officers at Williams Brothers was over 60 years old at the time.
Now, what year was that, Tim, that you had that dinner and accepting that offer? Do you remember roughly about what year?
1982.
Okay.
And
you would have been how old? How old were you?
33.
33. Okay.
And he told me at dinner that nobody had any sense before they were 40 anyway. So I went to work as a salesperson and tried to do the best job I could in the commercial area, and I got promoted to sales manager, and then took over all the sales at one point down the road, and we ended up with 97 salespeople.
Wow, I had no idea that it was that big.
Yeah, when I went there, we had 17 concrete plants. We had 9 or 10 retail stores. We had block plants. We had brick operation. We had lumber, sawmills, wood buyers. It went on and on and on. I think that was a good education for me, number one, to get to know those parts of the business that I didn't know. I did not know the ready-mix business particularly well, but I had worked in it with my dad, and after every game on Saturday in high school, he'd wake me up and we'd go to work. So I had a taste of some of that, and had been on that yard many times to pick up materials for my dad. And so it looked like a good opportunity for me and my family, and that's the way it went.
Now, and you alluded to this diverse company that it was, but could you take a little bit of time and explain some of that, some of those different lines of business and what you remember about them, and the ones that seemed to work, that were more successful, and just give us kind of a history of Williams Brothers, as much as you can.
I'll try to, Bill. The lumber group is what started the company, and it was a very old company. Horace and John were in the lumber business in South Georgia, sawmill business, basically, and were having a struggle with the times back in the war days, if you will. And his daddy suggested they come to Atlanta and go to work in the lumber business there, and that's what they did, is all lumber at that time. But they had a milling plant and another sawmill in Covington, and everything you needed in lumber. They had some very, very talented people in that company that knew how to make specialty trim, everything that you need to build a house or fancy office building, for instance, 3 and 5 crown mold, all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, the studs and 2x6s and 2x8s, 2x10s, all that stuff was there also. And so by the time I got there, they were in the ready-mix business and the block business. And the block business they had 2 block plants at a time. We grew it to about 6. And then we got in the brick business because we were in the block business, basically, and we could one-stop shop type thing, and the mortar mix. And sand, we ended up, that group down there was very creative. And one of the things they did was keep an eye on the market, and pre-mix, ready-mix was delivered to the job site. So when the bricklayers got there, they didn't have to mix it. They'd wait for it to sit They just started laying brick and block. It was an interesting process. About that time, the concrete wall boys came along, Reeves and Wagner's of the world. We sort of adapted to that with conveyors and everything they needed to pour the walls. But we had 17 concrete plants when I went there, mostly in the metro Atlanta area. And when I left there in '89, there was 47 concrete plants. Wow. And we did that through acquisition, mostly mom and pops. And they were getting to the age they wanted to get out of it, and then that branched us out into the Columbus and Augusta and Macon and all those general areas, and mostly following interstate work. Interstate helped us more than it helped them normally. So
I've got lots of questions that are popping up in my head as I listen, so let me pause you real quickly. So in those, and we'll get to that sale to Blue Circle in a moment, but before, in the time before that sale, was the business, was there a priority to commercial more than residential or DOT? Talk a little bit about the mix and why there was the focus that y'all had at that time. Tell us a little bit about that.
Our overall objective, we felt like after many studies had been done, is 60-40, 60% commercials, 40% residential. And the reason for that is, at least house builders not going to like this, but they don't schedule their work enough. Back then they didn't schedule it enough to depend on them. So we thought we'd major in the commercial work, and it worked out fine for us. We had our fiscal year went from September 30 to the next year, and we thought if we could not lose enough money, we could make enough money between end of September and Thanksgiving that we could get through the winter. And once we got through the winter, we'd make a real good profit for the year, and that's sort of the basic understanding. But we watched our cost as well as I think most anybody. I was very, very fortunate that Horace let me go with him down to visit Doc Rinker a couple of times, and I enjoyed visiting with him. The depth of the knowledge in his mind was just incredible. And had around 200 plants at the time. So, and every facility they had was based on profitability. They kept a separate sheet for every facility, and it helped me understand what we're trying to do and how to do it. And for instance, when the chemical boys came along and started playing with all that stuff, first thing we did is build a chemical plant over there. And we thought that would give us at least an equal standing or advantage in the marketplace somewhat.
And so that chemical plant, is that the one that Tony Cantrell, a young chemistry major, came to help that get going? Tell us a little bit about that.
That is correct. He and 2 or 3 other guys sort of put that thing together, and they didn't put enough safety stuff in it because it burned to the ground one time. I was sitting down at the Federal Reserve Bank had a board meeting down there, and I was looking east out the window. I said, "Gosh, that's close to where we are."
Oh my!
And I excused myself, went back to the call and said, "Yeah, you better get here." And it had caught on fire and burned the thing to the ground pretty much. So, but we rebuilt it and learned a good bit from the first one we built to the second. And but to maintain the quality of the product at that time was somewhat difficult before the chemicals. Once we started putting the water reducers and accelerators and all that stuff in there, it helped us control it better. I remember we were building the Waverly Hotel over in Cobb County and Trammell Crow. They were about 99% finished. Putting the carpet down, for instance, and the senior project manager called me and said, "Can you come over and have lunch? I want to show you something." I said, "Yeah." And I went in there, and he said, "Come on, let's walk out here." And they were putting the strips down along the wall for the carpet. And that old boy hit that gun, and that went bing right back over his head. He said, "We're going to kill somebody in here." I said, "Well, you're the one that ordered the 2-day strength requirement. I didn't order it." And but that was the first 2-day that we had ever had. But we didn't have, I guess, the confidence in the chemicals to do it, so we put more cement in it. And that's sort of the interesting part of some of those jobs that come up. One day we got our truck driver to put a load of fly ash in our cement. You know how that goes.
Yeah.
And we had to change the entire hosing system on the thing. We thought we had them all changed, but we didn't. And one of the other things that happened is, well, we'll get into that when we talk about Blue Circle.
Yes. Yeah, and we'll get to the Blue Circle. I'm very eager to hear about that. But before we do, talk a little bit about John and Horace, how they work together, how they the roles and the areas that each one had, and how did they get along together? So, tell us a little bit about the two of them and how they, kind of divided up the business.
Well, there's no question John ran the business, but in the ready mix, Horace ran the operations, and Harold Williams ran the sales, and that's sort of how they split the day-to-day stuff up. John was more of a political animal, and Wendell was the CFO, and he did the financing. They all had sons in the business, and I hesitate to guess the number. I mean, the relatives was in that business. Out of 2,300 employees, it was a good many of them. But they were all hardworking people, and they just well educated in that business to run things, and most of them had creative minds. That's why we got ahead of the market at times on certain things and what we were doing. But we had the fortune to buy enough new equipment to keep good equipment on the road and not run it down where we wasn't maintaining it and all that kind of stuff. So we had a big shop there, and we brought sand in from Alabama on 100 train cars down from Hawaii, Alabama, And the Rock. I mean, we were one of the better of the two Rock, better of the three, or wherever we were at the time of the Rock, if we could get it at the same price. And anything that went above 10 stories, we had to have the high quality, great stuff.
Right.
And especially in Atlanta, downtown Atlanta.
Question that just popped into my head. Did you guys get into the front discharge business? Did you purchase any front discharge mixers?
No, not really. We depended on conveyors, and this is another Blue Circle story I'll tell you when we get to it. But the reason people get in that business, it takes one less person to place it, basically. And we'd rather them to pay them than us to pay them for it. But no, we never, not while I was there anyway.
What do you think really set Williams Brothers apart from the other companies? What were some of the distinguishing features, attributes, characteristics of WB that you recall? And being so much in sales, I mean, that was always something I'm sure you used to sell. So I'd be interested to hear some of that.
Main thing, service. There's so many companies that are either not trained well enough with their dispatchers, or they choose to do other things with it that help their buddy, their brother-in-law, or whoever. But we had a pretty strict code on, if you tell a guy you're going to be there, be there. And we thought success was measured in plateaus. You're not going to ever get to the end, but you keep striving to do that. And our dispatchers were very, very well trained. We had a training center on site at Glenwood and a recurrent training center. If for some reason a pump broke down, for instance, on a job, and it backed up on us, we would send a salesperson or somebody out to the next job to let them know what happened. We wouldn't let them stand there and guess what happened.
Right.
And so I think services, and of course, the other thing is we had enough equipment to service on a day-to-day basis. That's important, very important.
Now, didn't y'all have, I'm trying to remember, of course, I didn't come into the market until 2002, but didn't you have a motto or a slogan? Was there a it was something to do with service, or maybe I'm mistaken?
We had a lot of mottos. That was one of Horace's big deals, and he used it as a tool to motivate people. And he came up with some doozies too. But that first, really, it's actually the second generation that grew the company tremendously. Their father started it and grew it to a certain degree, and I think Johnny and Horace came back in the early 50s, right after the war, and they took it over and ran it and started growing. And there's two or three things that helped that growth tremendously in Atlanta. Was first, the new airport. Put a plant on site, had one right there next to it, and poured every yard of concrete out there, I think, as far as I know. And the other was the mortar stuff.
Marta was. I was at Georgia Tech down at North Avenue when Marta really started emerging, and so that would have been in kind of the mid to late 70s, if I remember right.
You're right, and I remember we were pouring the 14th Street foundation over there. It's a floating foundation, and we had to start. It was a 26 or 8 hour pour.
Wow.
And we had 3 plants on it, and right at 100 trucks, 3 pumps, and we were about 90% finished and got a call from a job. It had come from, we started late in the afternoon when the traffic cleared, poured all night. The next day about 2 o'clock, this little engineer from the testing called and said, "Y'all better get out here. We're fixing to cut this pour off."
Oh, boy.
We rode out there, and the temperature was maximum at 96 degrees. And we were putting ice in it at the plant, and cold water coming out of the well at 52 degrees, and everything we could do with it. And I said, "Son, before you do this, I think I'd call your boss and get him out here real quick, because it's not only going to be an insurance claim, it's going to be a very large insurance claim." And he did, and he raised it to 97, 98 degrees, and we got through it. But that was one of the close, real disasters you can have.
And what comes to mind when you tell that story, it just highlights the risk that's in this industry, that's in this business. It is, whether it's the safety hazards of a 70,000 pound vehicle, and with a rotating drum, but certainly on the product side, with people, as you pointed out earlier, that aren't often the most skilled. There are just so many areas of exposure that a ready-mix producer faces, and risk that has to be managed.
Absolutely. And you better manage it very quickly. It happens real fast. We lost, we were playing the IBM Tower downtown. Dan Baker, this company out of Ohio, was pouring the thing for us, but he hired a slip form guy out of Fort Worth, Texas, and it was a 69 or 70 story slip form. We poured 1 floor a day. They had a plywood frame in there, and they jacked it up on 32 hydraulic jacks, and just pumped it up every day after it got through, and it set. And we were pouring 386 yards a day, every day, and we lost 1 truck because the driver left water on going to the job. And then they hung steel off of that job and put lightweight from there to the top. And then they built I don't remember how many cars that deck holds across the street, but it is a lot. I'm going to suggest over 1,000 cars at least. And they poured that, and that's the only truck of concrete we lost in the whole thing.
The whole project.
Yep.
Okay, let's kind of make the transition a little bit and talk about that transition from Williams Brothers to Blue Circle, as you recall, and as you do. course, my curiosity is why they sold, some of the factors that may have played into that decision, and then just kind of talk us through that process. And as you do, along the way, kind of fill us in on your role, how your role changed during that period. Anyway, you get the idea. Just kind of get us through that. But again, what was behind it, and as you look back on it.
Well, there's some trying times for the family. They had, I think, some of the ones that were not participating in working in the company thought that they weren't getting enough money. You know, they always go back to money. And started asking questions and different things, and it led to that one thing led to another, and a group went to see Vulcan and different people about buying the company and got an offer. And John was in the hospital at Emory with a heart problem. He got up out of the hospital when he heard about it and went straight to the office and called Blue Circle, who had made inquiries about it earlier, a year or two earlier. And for ones don't know, Blue Circle's it was a very, very good British company, and they had some really sharp minds in that company. They sent some over after they bought it, but the guy that came over first was named David Poole, and had the most impressive business card that I have ever seen and ever will see, I'm sure. He was the managing partner of the Western Hemisphere. And so it just fascinated me. But they ended up negotiating this, that, and the other, and we ended up making a deal, and by the end, I think it was December 6th of 86, closed it. And they came in and didn't do a whole lot of taking over. They, the economy had come back a little bit since after that downturn on the 80s, early 80s. And so there was some people they brought over here, and they were very helpful in what they did. It was only 3 or 4 of them. And so the family started slowly filtering out of the business. And they asked me to take it over and run it. And I did. And John Bordeaux with Blue Circle ran the U.S. for them. And we didn't see exactly how to do things every day, but they were in the cement business and wanted to sell the lumber and wanted to sell the block and the brick and keep the mortar mix and this and the other. Well, we went about and did it, and but at the same time that overhead had to be adjusted too. So we had some run-ins with that, and finally one day we just brought it to a head, and he said he wanted to run it, and I told him that one of us had to, but both of us couldn't. And so I resigned that day.
Now, what do you remember what year that was, Tim?
Early 90s.
Early 90s.
Yeah. It was late, maybe in 89, but I think it was early 90s. And they've gone on and run a successful company. David Poole died, well, Sir John Milne was the CEO at Blue Circle, and really sharp guy. He passed away, and David was who they had chosen to put in his place successor. David was in there 6 months, had a brain aneurysm, and died also. They didn't have a third, and they hired a guy from, well, another guy in the industry over there. He came in and started running it, and all the growth stopped. And it just sit there stagnant for about 2 or 3 years before they started growing again. And they finally made a pretty good adjustment, but they had built up a lot of cash in the bank. And the French came in and took it over, bought it. They bought it for the cash. It's just that simple.
Right.
And the quarries.
Right.
But that's how sort of that thing came down, and it happened fairly quickly. It wasn't long and drawn out, 6-month deal. It was maybe 6 weeks at the most.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you remember how did the employees how did that process? Those times are very difficult for the rank and file, or for anybody for that matter. Do you remember how people responded to the sale and the morale and that sort of thing?
I think I noticed the family first filtering out of the company. Most of them didn't have to work if they didn't want to, but one of the disasters that they brought with them, not many people knew about, some of them did, was they hired a guy to put in a point-of-sale billing system through our entire house full of solar lumber brick block. And still had everything. What a massive undertaking that was. And we had a board meeting talking about that. It was supposed to go live September 1. And I asked the guy, I said, "Have you gone live?" He says, "Yes." Okay, how long did you run it? He said, "Just a week." And everything checks out. And they didn't tell us that they'd sent a guy over here that was an alcoholic. We pulled that plug on September 1 and nothing happened. Zero.
Wow.
On December the 6th that year, we had to start billing manually again because people were coming up to their year end and they had to have some numbers. And we'd bought a company over in Austell, and the administrative lady impressed the heck out of me when we went over to take over. And I never did see the right fit for her until this came up. So I drove over there and asked if she'd be willing to come and help. She said, sure. She was a drill sergeant. I mean, a real good drill sergeant. She came over here and we hired 20 people to start billing that day, actually. And if they were supposed to be at that desk at 5 minutes to 8, they were there. And we avoided that disaster, but to Blue Circle's benefit, one of the little ladies that was on their staff, it was 4 or 5 on their staff, got pregnant and had to quit halfway through it. So it wasn't all his fault, but he got the blame for all of it. And they did some good things for Williams Brothers, and I think if they'd have had their succession planning in order, then most people don't, by the way.
Right.
And it would have turned out quite different.
Another question that I meant to ask earlier, I think it would be interesting to hear, how did your experience in coaching and in competitive sports, I'd just like to hear a little bit about how that played into your management and leadership when you came into Williams Brothers and moved up in the organization and leadership. Talk a little bit about how those coaching, playing, competitive talents and skills and habits, how did they become, kind of brought into your work?
Well, I think motivation is the key to most businesses, and getting employees to buy into what you're trying to do. And we spent a lot of time talking about that and discussing it in our leadership meetings. Like when we had those salespeople, we'd have an annual sales dinner and take them. One year we went down to Peachtree City to the conference center down there. One year we'd go somewhere else, but it's just getting them together and talking about how to do things and who's been successful and who could be more successful. And football, you learn you're going to get knocked down.
Right.
You better get up every time. And everybody's going to make mistakes. Live up to them before they get to be huge mistakes. And very costly mistakes. But some of it goes back to discipline and being on time and doing what you say you'll do.
Yes.
All those kind of things. And we tried our best to get all of our folks to buy into that. All of them didn't, but a bunch of them did. And the others that didn't saw the success of the ones coming along. And one of the very fortunate things for me, I think John Williams summed this up one time, right before he hired me. He said, if you can recruit in the Southeastern Conference, you can sell anything. And he's probably true about that.
Yeah.
I mean, but I happen to know a whole group of people, say 150, 200 people, of that age that you would hire salespeople and train them because of what I did at Auburn. And I recruited Atlanta 4 years and knew a lot of people in the industry. I could call and find out what kind of person they were. And good example, and I can't use the exact verbiage that I used at the time, but we had a kid that walked in there that was working for TVA and wanted to change jobs, moved to Atlanta. There was some girl behind it, I'm sure. And I talked to him about an hour, and I said, where'd you go to school? Because you naming a lot of people I know. I said, Troy State, sir. I said, doesn't Charlie Bradshaw work down there? Yeah, he's the head coach. I played for him for 4 years. Now this kid He may have been 5'8", 200 pounds, and played offensive guard for the meanest guy that ever coached the game. I said, go fill out your application. He became our third best salesman that year.
Wow.
One other interesting story about a sales guy was from Houston. Well, he was actually from New Iberia. He sold equipment to the offshore oil people. Oil shut down, so he puts his family in a car and comes up here, stays with his wife's aunt and uncle, and was sitting on our front steps when the lady walked in and opened the front door. And she opened up, and he walks in. She said, "Who are you here to see?" He said, "I don't know." She said, "Well, why'd you come?" He said, I'm going to work as a sales guy for you." "Who hired you?" "Nobody yet." I said, "Send that guy back here. I want to talk to him." And on Mondays is the day we had our residential group sales updates and stuff. So one of our managers was in the office in there, and I said, "Come on here, I want you to sit down on this." Because I don't know this guy at all. And we both talked to him and hired him that day. I ended up hiring him on the company I bought after I left Williams Brothers. He was that good. And but he checked out just like he said he would. He'd work his penny off. So it was an advantage of being in that sports and learning how to compete, and never give up.
Tim, that is such a great piece of advice. It's easy to forget sometimes when you're knocked down. And I really appreciate your sharing those stories. Tell us about life after Blue Circle. Kind of pick it up at there and kind of give us some of the highlights you alluded to just a moment ago, a business acquisition, but just kind of give us some hint of what the things that you were involved in after leaving Blue Circle.
Well, I think the more interesting one that most people would like to hear about is the year before I left, a friend of mine, Billy Payne, called, who I had met during recruiting in high school, told me about his effort to bring the Olympics to Atlanta. And I said, "Well, tell me more about it." He said, "Meet me down to Commerce Club and we'll talk." We stayed there 2 or 3 hours talking about it. And he had a plan, but he didn't have but 4 people at the time. I was the 5th person to join him. It was quite an educational process. It was a political process, but I learned a lot from a lot of different people about it, and about the Olympics, and about the world in general. But my motivation at the time was, yes, I wanted to do this and have a civic duty, and yes, they're going to build a lot of facilities. So we ended up not building a bunch of facilities. We built some. Turner Field was one, but probably the largest and best one for ready-mix. But most of it was renovating initial venues that were there already. There's some exceptions to that, but we traveled the world I remember coming back after we won the right to represent the U.S. in Washington, D.C. in '88. Harvey Schiller was our advisor. He was head of the U.S. Olympic Committee at the time, and he said, he brought me and Billy and Charlie Battle to the back of the plane because there's hardly anybody on it on a Saturday morning up there coming in. And he told us, he said, you don't have a clue what you've done. That's the bad news. The good news is you don't have to have but 49 votes, but they're scattered all over the world. So we picked his brain and picked it till the plane landed. And he said he was going home. We got through it, and with Greece having the first one, and them going to be the odds-on favorite for the 100th anniversary, we had a lot of work to do. Billy and Charlie did most of the traveling, and the rest of us did our share. But we ended up, when they got a very unusual way to choose, but I won't get into all of that, but we were Greece, Toronto, and us were the final three. And when Toronto dropped out, they didn't get enough votes, we got 7 votes more than we needed.
Wow.
Then we had to go to Athens to pick up the flame. We thought we'd be a black sheep at some kind of outcast wedding or whatever. But they entertained us at the 100-year-old tennis club over there at night. First night there, they showed us a picture, and Billy and I walked around that first stadium they ran in and took us to the Acropolis up on the mountain and got on a plane coming back to Los Angeles to start the road race, or a torch race. It wasn't really a race, it was a run.
A run, right.
Yeah. And took us 17 hours to get there. But it was interesting times.
Wow.
And so after that, I've got 100 stories to tell you about that, but back to your original question is, John had bought Tri-State Tractor by then, John Williams, and I went over and helped him organize his salespeople, and then I found this ready-mix operation over in Lilburn to purchase, and did. Grew it to 3 plants, and Thomas bought it after 5 years, and then I went to work for Bovis Construction, and Luther Cochran was our in-house, not in-house, but our lawyer. His firm was at Williams Brothers, and I got to know him pretty well, and he was elected president. He asked me to come join him, and I did, and stayed there 7 years, 6, 7 years, and started my own consulting company and helped shut down the J. Jones Company, if you remember them. It was very, very sad, but I got to know Bob Duma very well, and he's still the best construction guy that I've ever talked to personally. He built one of the Petronas Towers in Kuala Lumpur.
Oh boy, that's very noteworthy.
He built the SunTrust Tower here. He took the top off and built the addition on the Peril Mart up there. He's done some very prominent work, and he's retired now and is living in Panama with his wife, she was from there. So, but we miss him a lot. I miss talking to him on a regular basis because he knew this business as well as anybody. I think the most intriguing one was taking the top off at a Parallel Mart runs from street to street to street to street. Nowhere. They had to put yard and storage and trailers and everything else across the road and have a crane big enough to reach the other side of the building. On time. On budget. He did a lot of Portland work. I know that. And they are still a good company, but they don't do the volume that they used to.
Right.
But since then, Larry Beasley and some other folks, Yvonne Isaac, and somebody who's been in the consulting business for about 10 years now and do non-risk work.
Yeah.
And manage signing construction for people that don't want to have in-house people. I've enjoyed that. It sets up a whole different part of the game.
Another question that I always like to ask, and I'm interested to hear from you, is looking back over those years, who were, there are people who have great influence on us over the years. Everyone does. I mean, arguably, you have a lot of people that you interact with that influence you, of course, over a person's career. But some really stand out that have particularly great influence on you. Who comes to mind?
Well, two jump out real quick is Coach Shug Jordan at Auburn. He believed in discipline and was the old-time, hard-nosed football coach. It's just that simple, and he was like a father to me, a second father, let's put it that way. And my dad and John Williams was the other one. John was as good a politician as I've ever been around, bar none. He knew how to get to people and how to talk to them, and if he had to put on a dinner for department heads or whoever, he did it. And I learned a lot from business from him, a lot about business. I think those three. My dad taught me at a very early age, value your work. He didn't want to see me laying in bed on a Saturday morning. I'll tell you that. But there's other people that have influenced, but none to that degree, I don't believe.
Last question. It's very obvious to me that it wouldn't be anything for you and I to sit here and continue this conversation this entire day. We'd probably just have to shut down for dinner. But say a little bit. There'll be a lot of people listening to this who are young leaders, young people, new to the industry. Take a moment and give us some of your sage wisdom. You've been in the industry for many years, and as you pointed out, you've had the coaching and playing experience. And what advice? I mean, if you could really boil it down to a few words of counsel for people coming into the construction materials, ready-mix industry, what would you say? Welcome.
We need your help.
Yes. Yeah.
I think there's some wonderful opportunities in the construction materials business, and especially in today's market. And they pay pretty darn good today compared to what they used to. But you got to be disciplined. One little mistake anywhere, and it could come back to bite you in your insurance cost. If you start a business and put the wrong whatever in the mix, and you get up there 28, 30 stories, got a problem.
Yes.
I'll tell you one example that I did not personally witness, but our office in New York did. They had been after Donald Trump's company for 4 or 5 years to let them build some of their buildings. Well, he never would. One day they get a call, said, "Can you be down on East River at 3 o'clock? We're going to have a kickoff and we want you there." Well, Turner had been doing all of their work, but they had Turner there and they had the head of the New York office there, our Bovis office. And as Trump's reputation precedes him, he said, "We're going to put 26 buildings down this river on this narrow strip of land. You're going to do the first one, you're going to do the same time. First one that gets through on budget can do the rest of them."
Wow. Huh.
And both agreed. They get up 24, 26th floor. Turner puts a load of concrete in the slab, wouldn't set up. Cost them about 2 weeks of work.
Ooh. Whoa.
We finished ahead of time. But those are the kind of mistakes that you get into that you don't know about, actually, unless you check it and double check it and make provisions for errors. There will be traffic in the ready-mix business, and you'll be right in the middle of it mostly. That's one thing you got to have alternate routes and different ways to service the customer like they want service, not like you want them serviced. And to go by and check on jobs that unexpected, unrequired, but they know you're there and they know you like the service. I went on one at 4:30 one morning, and no problems. But they got to remember to this day that I was on there, and gave us a lot of work after that.
It's the little things that count.
Absolutely, but it's good it's good opportunities for ownership too. It's not like a labor force only. It doesn't take long to find out where the need is and fill it.
Yes.
It's just that simple. Most people don't know you can't put soft rock in high-rise businesses in Miami. They haul it in from somewhere around the Augusta area, I think, is still doing it, and across Mexico. Yeah, it's challenging at times, but we built a 61-story Four Seasons in Miami, right downtown, and the glazer went bankrupt halfway up the building. And there'll be some challenges, and the lawyers are taking a big role in that area over the last 20 years. That they found their niche, so other people can find theirs. And I wish you luck if you do decide to get in it, and I think it'll be meaningful long term for you.
Tim, thank you for those great words of it's an exciting business. It's a challenging business, and as you point out, and every day's a new day in the ready-mix business. Thank you so much for taking time today to meet with us and to tell us about yourself, tell us about Williams Brothers and Blue Circle and some of these great stories that I know our listeners are going to enjoy hearing. But we wish you well. We really do, Tim, and I do appreciate you agreeing to come or sit with us. We're actually in Tim's den, sitting in. He's in his comfortable chair, and we're here, and it's a lovely day. And I'm just grateful that you let me come into your home.
Glad to do it. Bill, thank you for your time, and I'm looking forward to. I've seen 2 of your videos, but I haven't seen all of them, so be interested in seeing all of them, actually.
Thanks, Tim. Take care. Bye-bye.